The observation chamber hummed with the quiet efficiency of advanced technology, its crystalline walls refracting the light from the binary suns beyond into prismatic rainbows. Zephyra pressed herself deeper into the shadowed alcove, her translucent form barely visible even to those who might know where to look. Her kind, the Kithrans, were naturally reclusive. Their crystalline bodies evolved for life in the deep caves of their mineral-rich world. Light was both beautiful and overwhelming to them, something to be appreciated in careful doses. For 3 cycles now, she had maintained her silent vigil from this hidden vantage point aboard the Nexus station. The research facility served as neutral ground where dozens of species gathered to study the unique astronomical phenomena of the Gemini system. Her people had sent her as an observer, tasked with documenting the behavioral patterns of other species, particularly the humans, whose emotional volatility concerned the Kithran Council. Through the transparent barrier that separated her observation post from the main research lab, Zephyra watched the daily ballet of interspecies cooperation. The humans moved with such energy, their voices carrying across the space in waves of laughter, concern, and animated discussion. Her own people communicated through harmonic resonances, subtle vibrations that traveled through solid matter. The cacophony of human verbal communication should have been jarring, yet she found herself drawn to its chaotic music. Her attention was particularly captured by one human who seemed to move through the chaos like a calm center in a storm. Dante Mercer, according to the personnel files she had studied, was the station's chief botanist. While his colleagues rushed between terminals and argued over data readings, he tended to the hydroponics bay with patient, methodical care. Zephyra had observed him for hours, fascinated by the gentle way he touched the leaves of alien plants, the soft words he spoke to encourage their growth, the genuine smile that transformed his face when he discovered a new bloom. Her crystalline form shimmered with involuntary color changes as she watched him work. Among her people, such displays were considered a loss of emotional control, but here in her hidden sanctuary, there was no one to judge her weakness. The warm golden hues that rippled through her translucent skin reflected feelings she had no words for. In her native harmonic language, the humans display concerning levels of emotional attachment to their work. She recorded in her daily report, her melodic tones captured by the harmonic recorder. Subject Dante Mercer shows particular signs of anthropomorphizing non-sentient plant life, suggesting dangerous levels of empathy that could compromise objective scientific judgment. Even as she spoke the words, Zephyra knew they didn't capture the truth of what she was observing. There was nothing dangerous about the way Dante cared for his plants. If anything, his emotional investment seemed to make his work more effective. The hydroponics bay under his care produced yields that exceeded all projections, supporting not just human nutritional needs, but providing sustenance for a dozen different species. Aboard the station, through her observation sessions, she had also witnessed Dante's interactions with other beings. When the young Vorthan researcher had struggled with homesickness, Dante had spent hours listening to stories about the gas giants' floating cities. When the elderly Thermax engineer had injured herself in an accident, Dante had been the first to offer assistance, somehow knowing exactly how to help without causing further harm. To her silicon-based physiology, her people's reports painted humans as emotionally unstable, prone to violence and unpredictable behavior. Yet in 3 cycles of observation, Zephyra had seen nothing to support these claims. If anything, the humans seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to understand and respond to the needs of others, even across vast biological and cultural differences. A soft chime indicated the end of the station's day cycle, and Zephyra watched as the research lab gradually emptied. Most beings retreated to their species-specific quarters, but Dante remained, moving between his precious plants with a watering system designed to accommodate the needs of flora. From 17 different worlds, the artificial lighting dimmed to simulate evening, and in the softer illumination, Zephyra found herself leaning forward, her natural camouflage making her nearly invisible against the crystalline wall. As if sensing her attention, Dante paused in his work and looked directly toward her hiding place. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Their eyes met through the barrier. Zephyra's form blazed with startled silver light before. She quickly suppressed the response, but it was too late. Dante had seen her. Instead of alarm or curiosity, his expression showed only gentle recognition, as if he had been aware of her presence all along. He raised one hand in a small wave, his lips curving in that warm smile she had observed so many times. Then, with characteristic patience, he returned to his plants, humming a soft melody that somehow penetrated the barriers between them. Zephyra remained frozen in her alcove long after the lab fell, silent, her form cycling through colors she couldn't control. For the first time since arriving at the station, she felt truly seen, not as a spy or an observer, but as herself. The sensation was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. That night, as she retreated to her quarters, Zephyra found herself facing a crisis that no amount of scientific training had prepared her for. She had come to study the humans and report on their weaknesses. Instead, she was beginning to suspect that she was the one being changed by the observation. Her final log entry of the cycle was shorter than usual. Further study required to understand human emotional responses. Observer neutrality may need to be recalibrated. She closed the recording, unaware that in choosing the word recalibrated instead of maintained, she had already begun the journey that would transform not just her understanding of humans, but her understanding of herself. The meteor storm struck without warning in the deep of night cycle, when most of the station's inhabitants were in their rest periods. Zephyra jolted awake in her quarters, as the facility's emergency system screamed to life, bathing everything in pulsing red light. The crystalline walls of her chamber vibrated with harmonic frequencies that spoke of danger, structural stress, and the need for immediate shelter. All personnel report to designated safe zones, the station's AI announced. In multiple languages and communication formats, meteor storm approaching, hull breach protocols in effect. Zephyra's translucent form flickered with anxious blues and purples as she wrapped her thermal regulation cloak around herself. Unlike many species aboard the station, Kithrans didn't require atmospheric pressure to survive, but they were vulnerable to rapid temperature fluctuations. The emergency protocols would shut down non-essential heating systems, and her quarters were far from the central hub where the safe zones were located. She joined the stream of beings moving through the corridors, her natural camouflage making her nearly invisible among the crowd. The panic was palpable not just from the humans, but from species across the station. The Vorthan's gas-filled environment suits hissed with stress markers, while the Thermax engineers' silicon forms glowed with heat signatures indicating extreme agitation. In the chaos, Zephyra took a wrong turn, following what she thought was a route to the central hub. Instead, she found herself in a maintenance corridor that led to the outer observation rings. The corridor sealed behind her as emergency bulkheads activated, trapping her in a section of the station that was rapidly losing heat and power. The temperature dropped quickly through the transparent aluminum windows. She could see the meteor storm in all its terrifying beauty, streaks of burning rock painting trails across the void, some large enough to cause significant damage if they struck the station. The sight was mesmerizing, but Zephyra's crystalline form was already beginning to dull as the cold seeped into her body. Kithrans entered a hibernation state when their core temperature dropped below sustainable levels. It was a survival mechanism that had served her people well in the deep caves of their home world. But here, isolated and alone, it might become a death sentence. No one knew where she was, and the maintenance corridor was unlikely to be checked. Until well after the storm passed, she sank to the floor, her back against the wall, and tried to conserve what warmth she had left. Her form cycled through the spectrum from warm golds to cool blues, then finally settling into the dull gray of approaching hibernation. Her thoughts became sluggish, her vision blurring as her body's survival systems began shutting down non-essential functions. Through the haze of approaching unconsciousness, she heard footsteps echoing in the corridor. A beam of portable light swept across the walls, and she tried to call out, but her voice resonated too weakly to carry far. "Hello, is someone down?" Here, the voice was familiar, warm with concern. I thought I saw someone heading this way. Dante Mercer rounded the corner, his emergency kit slung over his shoulder and a thermal blanket in his hands. His eyes widened when he spotted her huddled form. "Oh stars, you're one of the crystalline beings from the diplomatic wing, aren't you? How long have you been here?" Zafira tried to respond, but her harmonic voice barely registered above a whisper. Her translucent form had gone completely gray, and frost was beginning to form on her surfaces. "Hypothermia," Dante muttered, kneeling beside her. "Your species is vulnerable to cold, right? Like extreme hypothermia." He shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, then activated several emergency heat packs from his kit. "Can you understand me, Andante? I'm going to help you." The warmth from his jacket and the heat packs began to penetrate her dulled senses, but it wasn't enough. Zafira could feel her consciousness slipping away despite the external heat sources. Her body needed direct thermal transfer to jumpstart her systems, but that would require physical contact, something her people considered deeply intimate and reserved for only the most sacred circumstances. "This isn't working fast enough," Dante said, his voice tight with worry. "I've read about Kithran physiology. You need direct heat transfer, don't you? Like actual contact." Zafira managed the faintest nod, her form flickering with embarrassed silver, the implications of what he was suggesting. But the alternative was hibernation that might last for cycles, if she survived at all. "I know this might go against your cultural protocols," Dante said gently, "but I need to touch you directly, share body heat. Would that be okay?" Through her fading consciousness, Zafira saw genuine concern in his eyes, no judgment. No ulterior motives, just a sincere desire to help. She nodded again, barely perceptible. Dante carefully positioned himself beside her, then drew her against his chest. The moment their bodies made contact, Zafira's world exploded with sensation. Heat radiated from him like a personal sun, seeping through her crystalline structure and awakening systems that had begun to shut down. But more than that, she could feel his emotions through the contact, his worry for her, his determination to help, and underneath it all, a gentle curiosity about who she was. "There you go," Dante murmured, his arms encircling her carefully. "You're warming up. I can see the color coming back." Indeed, Zafira's form was beginning to glow with soft golden hues. As her core temperature stabilized, the sensation of being held was unlike anything in her experience. Kithrans touched only during the most formal ceremonies, and never with such intimacy. Yet there was nothing inappropriate about Dante's embrace. It was purely protective, offering comfort without demand. "Thank you," she managed to whisper, her harmonic voice gradually strengthening. "I did not expect this kindness. Just returning the favor," Dante said softly. "I've been watching you too, from the lab. You've been observing us for weeks." Zafira's form flickered with surprise. "You knew? Hard to miss once you know what to look for. The way the light bends sometimes, little changes in the harmonic resonance of the walls. Plus, you have excellent taste in observation spots." He smiled, and she felt the warmth of his amusement through their contact. "I kept hoping you'd come down and introduce yourself properly." "I am Zafira," she said, testing the sounds of standard Galactic on her tongue. "I am here to study human behavior patterns." "And what have you concluded so far?" Dante asked, his tone gently teasing. Zafira was quiet for a moment, processing not just his question, but the entire surreal situation. She was being held by a human, sharing heat and honest conversation with a being her people considered dangerously unpredictable. Yet she had never felt safer in her life. "I have concluded," she said carefully, "that my people's understanding of humans may be incomplete." Dante chuckled, the sound vibrating through his chest and into her crystalline form. "That's probably the most diplomatic way anyone's ever said we're not what we seem." Outside the windows, the meteor storm began to subside, the burning streaks growing less frequent. The emergency lighting shifted from red to amber, indicating the danger was passing. Soon, the station's normal operations would resume, and they would both be expected to return to their respective duties. But neither of them moved to separate. Zafira found herself memorizing every detail of the moment, the steady rhythm of Dante's heartbeat, the way his breath stirred the air above her, the incredible warmth that seemed to emanate not just from his body, but from his very being. "Zephyra," Dante said softly, "would you like to see the hydroponics bay sometime, when you're not on official observation duty? I think you might find it interesting." Her form blazed with startled silver, then settled into warm gold. "You would want to show me, even though I am here to study your species?" "Especially because of that," Dante replied. "If you're going to study us, you should see what we're really like, not just the official diplomatic version." As the all-clear sounded and the station systems began returning to normal, Zephyra realized that everything had changed. She was no longer just an observer watching from the shadows. She had become a participant in the very phenomenon she had been sent to study, and for the first time since arriving at the station, she was eager to discover what would happen next. 3 days passed before Zephyra found the courage to visit the hydroponics bay. She had spent the time analyzing her encounter with Dante, trying to categorize the new sensations and emotions she had experienced. Her official reports to the Kitharan Council became increasingly clinical and vague, focusing on technical observations rather than the growing questions about human nature that occupied her thoughts. When she finally made her way to the agricultural section of the station, she chose the quiet hours of the evening shift. The bay was a marvel of engineering, vast transparent domes, filled with growing things from across the galaxy, each section carefully climate-controlled to support different forms of plant life. The air was humid and warm, carrying the sense of earth and growing things that reminded her surprisingly of the thermal vents. In Kithra's deep caves, she found Dante tending to a section of Terran vegetables, his movements careful and precise. As he adjusted nutrient flow rates, he looked up at her approach, his face lighting with genuine pleasure. "Zephyra, I was hoping you'd come." He gestured to the plants around him. "What do you think?" She moved closer, her crystalline form catching and refracting the grow lights into small rainbows. "It is beautiful," she said, her harmonic voice carrying notes of wonder. "I did not expect to find such diversity. Each species has different needs," Dante explained, leading her deeper into the bay. "Temperature, humidity, soil composition, light spectrum. But when you get the conditions right, they all thrive together." He paused beside a section where flowering vines from 3 different worlds intertwined around a shared trellis. Sometimes the most beautiful gardens come from mixing things that aren't supposed to grow together. Zephyra studied the intertwined plants, understanding the deeper meaning in his words. "Your people seem to have a gift for creating harmony from diversity." "Not always," Dante admitted. "We make mistakes, sometimes spectacular ones, but we keep trying to do better." He touched one of the vine flowers gently. "What about your people? What's Kithara like?" For a moment, Zephyra hesitated. Sharing details about her homeworld went beyond her mission parameters. But looking into Dante's curious, open face, she found herself wanting to answer. "Beautiful but structured," she said carefully. "We live in the deep cave systems, where the crystal formations create natural harmonic chambers. Everything has its place, its proper resonance. There's order, predictability." She paused, her form flickering with conflicted colors. "But perhaps not much room for growth." Dante nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds peaceful, but maybe a little lonely." The observation struck closer to truth than Zephyra had expected. She had never thought of her life on Kithara as lonely Kitharans valued solitude and contemplation. But after experiencing the warmth of human connection, she was beginning to question many things she had taken for granted. "May I ask you something?" she said, moving to examine a cluster of bioluminescent fungi from the Vorthan gas giant. "Of course, when you helped me during the storm, you touched me without hesitation. For my people, physical contact is significant, reserved for ceremony or the most intimate bonds. Yet humans touch casually, freely. How do you distinguish between different types of contact?" Dante considered the question seriously. "Context, I guess, the intent behind it. A handshake is different from a hug, which is different from..." He paused, his cheeks coloring slightly. "More intimate contact. But it's all about connection. Really, sharing space, energy, emotions, and you can sense the intent, the emotion behind the touch, usually, body language, tone of voice, the situation." He moved to adjust the lighting over a section of delicate crystal fruits. When I held you during the storm, I could tell you were scared, grateful, curious, all at the same time. Zephyra's form blazed with silver surprise. You could sense my emotions, not exactly read them, but feel them. Your skin changed colors, and there was something in the way you relaxed when you realized you were safe. Dante turned to look at her directly. I hope that wasn't intrusive. I know different species have different comfort levels with that kind of awareness. No, not intrusive, Zephyra said softly, unexpected. My people believe emotions should be controlled, hidden. To have them seen so clearly is, she searched for the right word, vulnerable. Vulnerability can be scary, Dante agreed, but it's also how we connect with each other, letting someone see who we really are beneath all the protective layers. They spent the next hour walking through the various sections of the bay, Dante explaining the care requirements for different species while Zephyra asked questions that revealed her own deep understanding of biological systems. She had studied xenobotany on Kithara, though from a purely theoretical perspective. Seeing the plants alive, thriving under Dante's care, was entirely different from reading about them in academic texts. Your touch, she observed as she watched him coax a stubborn bloom to open. It's not just physical contact. You're communicating with them somehow. Dante smiled. Plants respond to attention, to care. Maybe it's chemical signals, maybe it's something more subtle, but they definitely know when someone cares about them. He glanced at her. Kind of like people. As the evening cycle progressed, their conversation moved from professional topics to more personal ones. Zephyra found herself sharing stories about her education on Kithara, her fascination with other species, her secret dream of traveling beyond her homeworld's rigid social structure. Dante told her about growing up on Earth's agricultural colonies, his decision to specialize in interspecies botany, his hope that understanding how different forms of life could coexist might help with galactic diplomacy. I keep thinking, Dante said as they sat on a bench beside a small pond where aquatic plants from 6 different worlds created an underwater rainbow, that if plants from completely different evolutionary paths can learn to share resources and space, maybe the rest of us can too. Zephyra's form glowed with warm gold. You see connections where others see only differences. Maybe that's why you caught my attention, Dante said softly. Watching you observe us, trying to understand, it felt like you were looking for connections too. Their eyes met, and for a moment the vast differences between their species seemed insignificant. Zephyra felt drawn to him by something deeper than curiosity or physical attraction. Though she was beginning to recognize that both were present, there was a kindness in him, a genuine desire to understand and nurture that resonated with something in her own nature she had never been encouraged to explore. Dante, she said, her voice carrying harmonics of uncertainty and longing. What we're doing here, talking like this, sharing thoughts, would your people approve? Some would. Some wouldn't, he admitted. But I think the ones who matter would understand that connection transcends species. What about yours? Zephyra's form dimmed slightly. They would say I have lost objectivity. That emotional attachment compromises scientific observation. She paused, then added more quietly, they would be correct. And how do you feel about that? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to address. Directly, Zephyra looked around the hydroponics bay at the impossible garden Dante had created where dozens of species thrived together, sharing space and resources in harmony. I feel, she said finally, like I'm learning to grow in ways I never knew were possible. Dante reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she chose. When she didn't, his fingers brushed against her crystalline hand. The contact sent waves of warmth through her structure, and she could feel his emotions through the touch, affection, wonder, and something deeper that made her form glow with responsive light. I'd like to keep learning with you, he said simply, if you'd like that too. Zephyra looked down at their joined hands, crystal and flesh, to forms of life that had evolved on worlds so different they might as well have been in separate universes. Yet here they were, finding commonality in the most unexpected places. Yes, she whispered, her harmonic voice carrying notes of joy and fear in equal measure. I would like that very much. As they sat together in the gentle light of the hydroponics bay, surrounded by the impossible garden that proved different forms of life could flourish together, neither of them spoke about the complications that lay ahead, the diplomatic protocols that forbade personal relationships between observer species and their subjects, the vast cultural differences that made their growing connection seem almost impossible, the fact that Zephyra's mission would eventually end, calling her back to a world that would never understand what she had discovered among the stars. For now, it was enough to sit in companionable silence, hands touching, hearts beginning to recognize each other across the infinite divide between worlds. The future would bring its challenges, but in this moment, they had found something rare and precious, a connection that transcended the boundaries their species had built between them. Outside the bay's transparent walls, the binary stars continued their eternal dance, casting shifting patterns of light across the station. And in the warmth of the hydroponics bay, two beings from different worlds took the first tentative steps toward a love that would challenge everything their peoples believed about the nature of connection across the. For 2 weeks, Zephyra and Dante met in secret, their encounters carefully timed to avoid the station's busier periods. They found hidden alcoves throughout the facility, quiet corners of the observatory, unused maintenance bays, forgotten storage, areas where they could talk without fear of discovery. Each meeting deepened their understanding of one another, and with it, the growing realization that what they felt transcended mere curiosity or friendship. Zephyra found herself changing in ways she hadn't expected. Her natural camouflage abilities, once used to hide from observation, now seemed less important than the moments when Dante could see her clearly. Her crystalline form had begun displaying colors she hadn't known she was capable of: warm roses and deep purples that seemed to emerge only in his presence. She caught herself humming the melodies he sang while working, her harmonic voice adapting human songs into something entirely new. For his part, Dante had become attuned to her subtle emotional displays in ways that amazed them both. He could read the meaning in the shift of her colors, the way her form brightened when she was happy, or dimmed when she was troubled. He had even begun learning basic Kitharan harmonic communication, though his human vocal cords could only approximate the crystal song of her people. It was during one of their evening meetings in the hydroponics bay that disaster struck. They had been sitting together beside the flowering vines, Zephyra's hand resting in Dante's as she told him about the crystal gardens of her homeworld. Her form was glowing with soft golden light, the colors shifting in patterns that Dante had learned indicated contentment and affection. The resonance chambers on Kithara create music. From the very stones, she was saying, her harmonic voice weaving melodies into her words. But I think I prefer the songs you humans make. They carry emotion in ways our crystal songs cannot. Maybe you could teach me one of your songs, Dante suggested, his thumb tracing gentle patterns on her crystalline palm. I'd like to understand how your people express. What is the meaning of this? The voice cut through their intimate moment like a blade. They sprang apart, Zephyra's form blazing with startled silver as she saw Ambassador Keth standing at the entrance to the hydroponics bay. The senior Kitharan diplomat's tall, angular form radiated disapproval, his own crystalline structure dark with controlled fury. Ambassador, Zephyra stammered, her voice losing its musical quality in her shock. I was conducting observational research. Research? Keth's harmonic voice carried overtones of disgust that made the nearby plants seem to wilt. This is what you call research, engaging in physical contact with your subjects, allowing emotional contamination to compromise your mission? Dante stepped forward, his protective instincts overriding diplomatic protocol. Ambassador Keth, I understand your concern, but Zephyra has done nothing wrong. Our interactions have been. You will not speak, Keth commanded, his voice resonating with frequencies that made the crystal structures throughout the bay vibrate ominously. You have corrupted a diplomatic observer through your species' typical emotional manipulation. This incident will be reported to both our governments. Zephyra's form cycled through rapid color changes: fear, anger, desperation. Please, Ambassador, allow me to explain. My research has revealed important information about human behavioral patterns that could benefit The collective, your research, Keth interrupted, has revealed that you are unfit for diplomatic service. You will return to your quarters immediately and prepare for transport back to Kithara. Your mission is terminated. The words hit Zephyra like a physical blow. Her form dimmed to near transparency, all color draining from her crystalline structure. Return to Kithara meant not just the end of her mission, but exile from everything she had discovered about herself. The rigid social structures of her home world would ensure she never had another opportunity for off-world assignment. You can't do this, Dante said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Zephyra is a brilliant researcher. Her insights into interspecies cooperation could benefit everyone on this station. Keth's attention turned to him with the weight of ancient disapproval. Human, your species' tendency toward emotional excess is well documented. That you would seek to corrupt. One of our observers merely confirms our concerns about your people's stability. Corrupt. Dante stepped closer to Zephyra, whose form was now flickering weakly. I care about her. She cares about me. That's not corruption. It's connection. Connection. Keth repeated the word as if it tasted foul. Yes, we have observed. Your species' obsession with emotional bonding. It clouds judgment, compromises objectivity, leads to irrational decisions that benefit no one. Zephyra found her voice, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. What if the bonding is not irrational? What if it enhances understanding rather than compromising it? Keth's form shifted to even darker hues. You have been thoroughly compromised. Report to your quarters. Transport arrangements are being made. As the ambassador turned to leave, Dante called after him. What about the other species on this station? Have you bothered to observe how humans interact with them? How we work together, solve problems, create things that benefit everyone? Keth paused at the entrance. Other species maintain proper emotional distance. They do not engage in the excessive physical contact and emotional display that characterizes human behavior. Because you've all been taught that connection is weakness, Dante said. But what if you're wrong? What if the ability to form bonds across species lines is actually our greatest strength? The ambassador's response was a harmonic note so cold it seemed to freeze the air around them. Sentiment, nothing more, and with that, he was gone. In the silence that followed, Zephyra sank onto the bench where they had shared so many conversations. Her form was almost completely transparent now. All the vibrant colors that had marked their time together faded to nothing. I have to go, she said, her voice barely audible. Dante sat beside her, careful not to touch her without permission, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. There has to be something we can do, an appeal process. Another ambassador who might listen. You do not understand, Zephyra interrupted. This is not just about my mission. When I return to Kithara, I will be subjected to harmonic reconditioning. They will adjust my emotional responses to ensure this never happens again. The implications of her words hit Dante like a physical blow. They'll change who you are. They will make me who they believe I should have been all along. Objective, distant, incapable of the feelings that led to this compromise. Her form flickered with the faintest hint of rose-colored light. I will forget what it feels like to be warm. Dante was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what they faced. When he spoke, his voice carried a determination that made Zephyra's form brighten slightly. Then we don't let them take you back. Dante, you cannot fight to governments. Your people will not risk diplomatic relations with the Kitharan collective for one botanist and a compromised observer. Maybe not, Dante agreed, but they might listen if we can prove that what we've found is worth preserving. That connection between species isn't just possible, but beneficial. Zephyra looked at him, seeing the same gentle strength that had first drawn her attention during her secret observations. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we make a stand, together. Show them that what we have isn't weakness or corruption, but something new. Something that could change how all our species interact. The idea was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. Zephyra's form began to glow with tentative golden light as she considered the possibility. It would mean giving up everything we've known. Our homes, our cultures, the approval of our people. Yes, Dante said simply. But it would also mean keeping what we've found, each other. Outside the hydroponics bay, the station continued its normal operations, unaware that in a small garden filled with impossible combinations of plant life, two beings from different worlds were contemplating a choice that could reshape the future of interspecies relations. Zephyra reached out and took Daddy's hand in hers, her crystalline fingers intertwining with his flesh ones. For the first time since Ambassador Keth's rival, her form blazed with confident light. "Tell me your plan," she said, her harmonic voice carrying notes of courage and hope. "If we are going to change the universe's understanding of love, we had better do it properly." In the soft glow of the grow lights, surrounded by plants that proved different forms of life could thrive together, they began to plan their revolution, one that would be fought not with weapons or politics, but with the simple, radical power of two hearts that refused to be kept apart by the vast darkness between worlds.